Imagine being able to see the world in a way completely differently than you do right now, to be able to dream, think, and process information in a completely unique way. Well, that's what I believe that learning a new language can do for you. Hi, I'm Aastha. That's me up there in the blue shirt. And I am the child of bilingual parents. I was surrounded by family growing up who could speak Gujarati, which is one of our native languages in India. However, even with friends who could speak Chinese, French, Spanish, I never really could. I spent 3 years in high school Spanish classes and hundreds of hours on Duolingo, really trying, and I still today only know English. See, language as a whole is so much more than just words. It's based in history. It's the foundation of all of our stories and fables that get passed down from generation to generation. And it is part of all of our history and education. However, when you go to learn a language, you most often start with people telling you to start translating. And I want you to think about a time where maybe you walked into a language class for the first time, or you opened that language learning app. You probably saw something like this. Really basic words with some pictures to help you learn and memorize what they meant. If I were to ask you right now to tell me the difference between an apple and a tree, I'm sure you could give me a whole host of answers. Some of you would say, an apple is red and a tree is green. A tree is a lot bigger than an apple is. And some of you would probably think, well, they're simply just two different objects. However, if I were to ask a Spanish speaker the same question, they would be able to tell me that an apple is feminine and that a tree is masculine. And if I went to a German speaker and asked the same thing, they would tell me that the apple is in fact masculine. Now, as an English speaker, none of that ever made sense to me. We don't have masculine, feminine, and when I was taught that in school, I simply memorized what each word was in the hopes that I would be able to guess the next one correctly. Spoiler alert, I never was. And eventually, what happened is I was learning a language without having any sense of what it was supposed to feel like. See, after time, when you do this, you're learning the words, but you're not accepting or learning the culture and the feelings that come behind that. So when I had the opportunity in college to do a research project, I knew I wanted to focus on just that. How do our brains fundamentally process and learn new sounds when we're trying to learn a foreign language? See, every sound comes with a sound wave, and each sound wave is a visual depiction of what our brain and our ears are hearing and processing with that noise. And I wanted to test exactly what is required for a person to be able to distinguish two separate sounds. So I gathered over 300 participants from all different places, different ages, different locations, different backgrounds. And the only thing they had in common was that each of them natively spoke one of the 10 most spoken languages in the world. Think English, Spanish, Urdu. And I gave them a very simple test. I found 50 vowels across different language trees. And for each of those vowels, I would alter the frequency just a little bit so that its sound wave would look a little different than it did before. And then I would give each participant one vowel sound with 2 different frequencies and ask them a very simple question. Are these 2 sounds the same or are they different? And I would continue to do this over and over again with a bunch of different vowels and with different variances of frequencies, making the difference smaller and smaller until they were no longer able to detect a difference at all. And the results of it were fascinating. There are many ways to classify different languages, but the one that I focused on was the vowel density. Every language contains vowels. In English, we have A, E, I, O, and U. However, with those vowels, you can make over 20 different vowel sounds. You can have a long A, a short A, or you can put an A and E together and it makes a different sound completely. And when you do this, you're basically training your brain to hear small tonal differences. And since English has over 20 different vowel sounds, we're considered a high vowel density language compared to most other languages. However, on the other side of the scale, there are languages that are low vowel densities, something like Russian, where they have 7 or less of these vowel sounds. And when we put all the data together, we could see that all of those languages in red are your high vowel density languages, and they were consistently the best performing in being able to discriminate between two very close sounding vowels. And what we learned was because their entire lives they had known a language where those tonal shifts and small differences were important, their brain became adept to hearing these small changes. And when we asked them to do it just one more time on the test, it wasn't anything but their natural sense. However, in the white, you can see all of the low vowel density languages. These languages had a very hard time being able to discriminate between anything that was close in frequency. And often, when they would guess, it was basically not much better than a simple 50-50. Now, if you think about learning a language, essentially what you're doing is giving your brain a bunch of new sounds that you've never heard before. And those sounds can be put together to make words, and eventually to make sentences and have meaning to them. However, if you're struggling with step one to even being able to hear those sounds and recognize them, it becomes really difficult to be able to learn new words and process those sounds correctly. And how are we going to let somebody fall behind simply because of their linguistic background? I don't think that we should. Instead, I think we need to take a different approach. Think about when a baby is learning a language. They don't know vocabulary, or they don't get a textbook with conjugations of how to learn grammatically correct English, perhaps. What they do is they learn the words most imperative to their life. They learn how to call for their mom or their dad. And as they get older, they learn the words that surround their lives and that they interact with the most. And eventually, as their world widens, so does their knowledge of language. And we need to do the same thing. Instead of learning by translation, we need to start absorbing our languages, and we need to start living them in our lives that are perfect for us. So, I want to take a quick trip to a grocery store. It's an errand we all have to run. Every week or two, you have to go shopping to get your food. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm out, either on my way to school or work running an errand, I always have my headphones on. I'm either listening to music, calling my mom, listening to a podcast, and I consistently am listening to something. Now, instead of listening to music, imagine if you were listening to a real-life translation of the language you were trying to learn. So if we go back to that apple, when I'm shopping for an apple, if I'm in the grocery store, I'm going to put my headphones on, connect them to my phone, and the moment that I pick up an apple, I will hear the real-time translation of I picked up an apple in the language that I am trying to learn. But not only that, we just discovered that every person has a different ability to hear sound. So, based off of your linguistic history, where you're from, what languages you know, how you even learned those languages, and for how long, we're able to calculate the exact frequency, intonation, and pace that is best for you. And after a while of listening to these things in real time, while doing your errands, while going on walks, commuting to school, and doing activities that are important to your life, you're going to realize that your brain has suddenly learned a completely new language. And not once will you be told the translation of a single word or a phrase. You won't learn which words are verbs or nouns. You're simply going to let your brain do what it does best, find patterns and process information. Your brain's already done it one time before, when you learn the language that you currently speak, and you just need to let it do it again. But you need to create the environment and the time and the information to allow it to do so. And overall, what's important is that instead of learning languages by translation, we're learning languages authentically. We're learning the language with a mind of the culture and the values, and we're learning why an apple feels like it's feminine in Spanish, but masculine in German. And then, after some time, as you start to learn what's more naturally spoken and your brain recognizes these patterns, you will realize that you suddenly know a new language and that you can connect with neighbors and friends and colleagues that you wouldn't have been able to speak to before. You'll be able to go to your best friend's house and understand the inside jokes and what the little trinkets on their shelf mean. And if you're anything like me, then maybe one day you'll be able to go home to your family and speak to them in the language that they know best. and connect with them deeper than you ever would have been able to before. And if nothing else, as humans, we deserve to experience life as fully and as in-depth as we possibly can. And what better way to do that than to see the world through someone else's eyes? Thank you.